What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Thomas Dolby. And we're going back to his Golden Age of Wireless album, 1982. And the next track is called Radio Silence. I think in most contexts, it's an operational phrase, right? It's not just that there will be no transmissions across whatever line of communication has been established, but that the silence is specifically for operational purposes. Once we get within range where, this place we're infiltrating, where they could actually hear our communications, we have to go radio silent so that we can infiltrate without being detected. And so, yeah, I don't know, maybe it's because I watch a lot of action movies, but when I first hear or see that phrase, that's what I think of. The idea of having to go communication quiet because you have something you have to achieve. Now, fair to say, I feel like it's the kind of phrase that you could use to make a point about commercial radio, maybe playing certain tunes, not necessarily like in a payola way, but more like, choosing certain types of tunes that are less experimental and a bit more catchy and ready-made for commercial appeal. But yeah, I don't know. I've only heard a bit, like half of an album from Dolby, as well as a couple tracks from like a vinyl single that I have. And admittedly, some of his songs, I've been trying to keep up with the lyrics as they come, so yeah, I don't feel like I know enough about his songwriting yet to get a sense of whether to expect something like that or not. But admittedly, it is a phrase that you hear in certain contexts, and I feel like you could take it as a more direct meaning in that context, or you could perhaps use it as a metaphor or figurative rendering of something related to the music industry. So let's find out if it's either of those things or nothing at all, or completely unrelated, I mean to say. This is Thomas Dolby. The tune is Radio Silence. I suppose it could be nothing at all, right? I doubt that will be the case, but it's from the Golden Age of Wireless, 1982. Everything's rattling, rapid firing. I was gonna say, it sounds like we're talking about an android. And that mechanized vocal certainly does it. I like it. Does some interesting things with his vocals. certainly wasn't silent. It didn't sound operational, but at the same time, it didn't really necessarily sound like it was making a comment on the music industry. I'm not quite sure what's happening. But yeah, ultimately, the sonics are fascinating, and like, it's not the first time, and it's interesting. I was saying like, oh, songs that are a bit more tidy and catchy and have like immediate commercial appeal versus those that are a bit more experimental, perhaps a little less accessible or a bit more of a challenge, the first time you hear them. His tunes feel like they're both at the same time. It feels like they're catchy, and his vocals, they have like a sound that, it's funny, I don't know, maybe I'm like imagining this, but there's been a couple times over the course of like half an album we've gone through for Golden Age of Wireless where I've been like, oh, it's reminding me a little of Newman's vocals. And I'm like, wait, no, is it Fox's vocals? And it's like, maybe because I'm aware that some of these artists are, sort of pioneering in the early 80s, even late 70s, early 80s synth pop sound, or sounds plural. Perhaps I'm like conflating their voices too. But yeah, there's a couple times where his singing reminds me of Newman, but then he'll do things that are like, he'll sort of push it in certain moments where it feels like, okay, it's different from those other singers that I'm thinking of. So I do enjoy his vocals, and it's interesting because like, not knowing much about, or not knowing his career at all. Like, it wasn't a name that I remember hearing growing up, and it was only, later I think I got the record, like, oh, Thomas Dolby, okay, it's one of my 80s records. But it was only once I started going through his material, shout out to Han Solo once again, that a few friends of the channel commented and indicated, sort of he has this, he does make music that's a bit more creative, a bit more experimental. And yeah, certainly I experienced that with the Heavy Breather remix of the Hyperactive track. I forget if it's Heavy Breather, but yeah, definitely I've gotten a sense for that, but it's weird because it's like his tunes sound catchy and, very accessible in some ways, but then they have this complicated composition, and he does some different things with his vocals. So I guess what I'm saying is it feels like his music is somewhere in the nexus between more commercially accessible and more experimental. Maybe not like some of the early Human League stuff I've heard, which is like more on the experimental end, but definitely a blend of those different parts of the spectrum. So I don't know if what I'm saying will make sense to people who've known his music for much longer, but as I start to go through it, that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting, that it's like, wow, this is really interesting, but it's also catchy, and it's very like immediately enjoyable to listen to, but it also, there's some really interesting compositional or like structural choices along the way. So I'll stop talking. Luca and I will see you next time. Do let me know what you think. Peace.